A poor mechanic, a crying girl holding his son's name. He thought it was just another cold, quiet evening in his garage, until a stranger knocked on his door, soaked, scared, and clutching a name that would unravel a secret his late wife had taken to the grave. What followed wasn't just a story about fixing a car. It was about rebuilding trust, rediscovering family, and learning that sometimes the people we lose still find ways to bring us exactly who we need. If stories like this touch your heart, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. We share real, emotional, and inspiring tales every week. Now settle in, because this one will stay with you long after the last word is spoken. A poor mechanic took in a crying girl. Holding his son's name, what he found next shocked him. The sun had barely cracked the horizon when Tom Bennett pushed open the creaking door of Bennett's Auto Repair. The smell of cold metal and oil wrapped around him like an old coat. Familiar, a little worn, but comforting in its way. Outside, the frost still clung to the windshield of the Chevy Suburban parked at the curb. Early November in Maple Hollow always carried a bite in the air, like winter was just waiting for permission to fully settle in. Inside the small office, the coffee machine sputtered to life, groaning like it resented the morning as much as he did. Tom rubbed the back of his neck, sore from a restless sleep. He hadn't really slept well in years, not since the accident. A pair of small boots clomped down the stairs behind him, too loud for the size of the feet inside them. "Morning, Dad," came a voice as warm as a fireplace in December. Tom turned to see his 10-year-old son, Lucas, already dressed in jeans and a flannel shirt 3 sizes too big for him. One of Tom's old ones, sleeves rolled up to the elbows like a proper mechanic. The boy's sandy brown hair was a tousled mess, his cheeks still pink from sleep. "Hey, buddy," Tom smiled, his heart giving that familiar tug. "You ready to help me ruin another carburetor today?" Lucas grinned. "Only if I get to use the socket wrench this time." Tom chuckled and poured 2 mugs of coffee, one black, the other with a splash of hot cocoa for Lucas. It was their ritual. They shared everything now, ever since Claire, Tom's wife, Lucas's mother, had died 7 years ago. A drunk driver, a rainy road, a 10 p.m. phone call that split his world in half. But this wasn't a sad house. Not anymore. Tom had made a vow, the night after the funeral, when he sat on the porch with a baby monitor beside him and a half-empty bottle of whiskey he never touched again. He promised her, and himself, that Lucas would grow up in light, not in shadows. There'd be scraped knees, Sunday pancakes, and rusty old trucks in the backyard before there'd be pity. The bell above the garage door rang as their first customer pulled up. Business was modest, but the townsfolk trusted Tom. He was the kind of man who didn't upsell you on a new radiator when a clamp would do. Folks appreciated that kind of honesty in a town that had seen better decades. By noon, they'd fixed a flat, tightened a loose belt, and accidentally set off a horn for 15 seconds straight. Lucas laughed until he hiccuped. Tom felt the warmth of that laugh long after it stopped echoing in the garage. But by 4:30, clouds had rolled in low and heavy. Rain tapped nervously at the tin roof as Tom wiped his hands on a rag, ready to call it a day. That's when he saw her. A girl, young, maybe early 20s, standing just beyond the edge of the lot, soaked to the bone. Her hoodie clung to her like wet paper, and her shoulders shook with silent sobs. She was holding something tight in her hand, a piece of paper, crumpled and dark with water stains. Tom hesitated. He wasn't the type to interfere. People came and went through life carrying their storms, and not all of them wanted shelter. But there was something about the way her head was bowed, the way she clutched the paper like it held her together. It triggered a reflex in him, the same one he'd felt when Lucas first reached for his finger as a baby, fragile and trusting. He stepped out into the rain. "Hey," he called gently. "You okay?" The girl flinched and looked up. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but still sharp, alive. She looked like someone who hadn't spoken out loud in days. I don't know," she whispered, voice cracking like ice. Tom moved closer, slowly, hands visible, posture open, the way you might approach a wounded animal that still had claws. "You lost. Need a place to wait out the rain?" She didn't nod, didn't shake her head either. She just opened her hand and held out the soggy piece of paper. On it, written in smeared ink, were two words, Lucas Bennett. Tom froze. The world seemed to shrink in around him, the rain muffling all other sounds. His name, his son's name, on a stranger's paper, in the hands of a girl who looked like she hadn't eaten in days. "Where did you get that?" he asked carefully. "I was told," she swallowed hard, voice barely audible, "to find him." Tom felt his heartbeat in his throat. He looked back at the garage where Lucas was bent over a model engine on the workbench, blissfully unaware. He turned back to the girl, studied her again, pale, shivering, but something in her expression, underneath the fear, looked familiar. He made a decision. "Come on in," he said, taking off his jacket and placing it gently over her shoulders. "You look like you've been through hell." The girl clutched the coat around her like a lifeline. For a moment, she didn't move. Then slowly she stepped forward, one hesitant foot in front of the other, and crossed the threshold into the light spilling from the garage. Tom didn't know it yet, but that moment, quiet and soaked in rain, would change everything. Not just for him, not just for Lucas, but for all three of them. Forever. The rain didn't let up as Tom guided the trembling girl through the garage and into the small office, where the air still smelled faintly of coffee and engine grease. She moved like someone who hadn't slept properly in days, like each step required deliberate effort. Her shoes left muddy prints on the tile, but Tom didn't care. Lucas looked up from the model engine. His eyes, curious and wide, darted from the girl to his father and back again. "Who's that?" he asked softly. Tom glanced at the girl. She stood just inside the doorway, dripping, arms folded tightly across her chest as if afraid everything might fall apart if she let go. "This is," he hesitated, "someone who needs a dry place to sit for a while." Lucas nodded as if that made perfect sense. He reached for a folded blanket from the shelf near the couch and brought it over. "You can sit here," he offered, patting the worn cushion. The girl didn't move at first. Then slowly she took the blanket, murmuring a barely audible "thank you," and lowered herself onto the couch like someone unsure whether they were allowed to rest. Tom poured her a fresh cup of coffee, adding a spoonful of sugar and a splash of milk, just in case. He handed it to her without a word. She held the mug in both hands, letting the warmth seep through her fingers before taking a cautious sip. "I'm Tom," he said after a beat, crouching beside the couch so his gaze met hers. "And that's my son, Lucas." At the sound of his name, Lucas offered a half wave. "Hi." The girl flinched. Her fingers tightened around the mug, and her lips trembled as though the two syllables held more weight than she could bear. Tom noticed. "You said someone told you to find Lucas?" She nodded, eyes never leaving the rim of the cup. "Do you know him?" She shook her head. "Then how do you know his name?" She reached into the pocket of her soaked hoodie and pulled out a second piece of paper, this one folded more neatly. Her fingers trembled as she handed it to him. Tom unfolded it carefully. It was a letter, handwritten in smooth cursive, slightly faded with time but still legible. His breath caught before he even read the first line. The handwriting was Claire's. He knew it instantly. The graceful loops, the delicate way she curled her lowercase y. His heart thudded heavily as he scanned the page. If you're reading this, then I'm no longer here. But she is. And she needs someone. The right someone. I know this is a lot to ask. But Tom, if you ever see this girl, please help her. She's a good soul who's had a hard road. And Lucas, he deserves to know the story. With love always, Claire. He read the letter 3 times, each word digging deeper into his chest. It was dated nearly a year before the accident. He looked up slowly, eyes narrowing with equal parts disbelief and confusion. "Where did you get this?" The girl swallowed, voice hoarse. "She gave it to me." "You knew Claire?" She nodded. "A long time ago, when I was a kid." Tom sat back on his heels. Claire had never mentioned a child, never talked about anyone she had written to or promised anything to beyond their family. She had been private, yes. But this? "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Emily." He repeated it in his mind, searching for recognition. Nothing. How old are you, Emily? 22. Where are you from? I don't know anymore, she said quietly. I've been moving around. Tom could feel Lucas watching all of this from the corner, quiet as a shadow. He turned to his son. Hey, why don't you go finish your drawing in the kitchen? I'll be right there. Lucas nodded, sensing the weight in the room, and padded up the short steps that led into their home. The door clicked shut behind him. Tom turned back to Emily. Tell me the truth. Why are you really here? I told you, she said, finally looking him in the eyes. Claire gave me that letter. She told me to come find Lucas, that it was important, that he was part of something I needed to know. Her voice cracked on the last word. She looked down again, as if ashamed of needing anything at all. Tom ran a hand through his damp hair. The room felt too small, too full of questions and ghosts. He didn't know what to believe, whether this was some cruel joke, or worse, a scam. But the way Emily held herself, the fear behind her exhaustion, it didn't feel fake. It felt like someone barely hanging on. Did she tell you what this was about? He asked, softer now. Emily shook her head. Only that she owed me something, that she never got to keep a promise, and that you were the only one who could explain. Tom stood and walked to the window. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, the kind that lingered without purpose. He remembered a night long ago, Claire holding a letter she never sent, tears in her eyes, saying, some promises are too late to keep, but maybe not forever. He'd thought she meant her sister, but Claire had never had a sister. He turned back to the girl curled up on the couch, holding a mug like it was her last possession in the world. All right, he said quietly. You can stay the night. Just one night, until we figure this out. Emily looked up at him, stunned. You don't have to. I know, but I think I do. She nodded, eyes brimming. Thank you. Tom walked toward the kitchen, still holding the letter. Claire's familiar script burned into his memory. His heart felt heavy, uncertain, and yet somehow opened. Whatever this was, it wasn't coincidence. And for the first time in years, Tom Bennett didn't just feel the weight of the past. He felt the stirring of something else, a beginning. The smell of roasted chicken drifted through the kitchen, mingling with the quiet crackle of the fireplace and the distant tick of the old wall clock. It was a small, lived-in space, faded wallpaper with a vine pattern, a fridge cluttered with drawings and reminders, a worn wooden table that had probably seen more repairs than some of the cars in Tom's shop. Emily sat at the edge of her seat, back straight, hands folded tightly in her lap. Her hair was damp but combed now, her clothes dry thanks to a borrowed sweater and sweatpants that hung awkwardly from her thin frame. Tom's ex-wife's old clothes, tucked away in a linen drawer like memories no one knew how to fold neatly. Across from her, Lucas leaned his chin on one hand, spoon in the other, chewing thoughtfully. He wasn't staring, not exactly, but he watched her with the careful curiosity of a child raised on quiet truths. Tom sat at the head of the table, carving chicken with slow precision, as if slicing through more than just meat. His eyes flicked toward Emily now and then, searching for signs. Answers, maybe, but mostly just trying to read her without making her flinch. They ate in a stillness that wasn't uncomfortable, just unfamiliar. So, Lucas said, breaking the silence with the clatter of his spoon. You knew my mom? Emily hesitated. Yes, a long time ago, when I was little. Lucas considered this. Was she nice? Emily smiled faintly. The nicest person I ever met. Tom's knife paused. He cleared his throat, then resumed cutting. How exactly did you two meet? Emily looked down at her plate. I was in a group home, outside of St. Louis. I think I was maybe 8 or 9. She came once a week to volunteer, read stories, help with homework. Most people didn't stay long, but she kept coming back. Tom blinked, stunned. Claire had never mentioned that part of her life. Not in all their years together. He'd known she had a giving heart. She'd been a nurse after all. But she'd always carried a shadow he never fully understood. A kind of sorrow she kept in the softest part of her voice. She read me Charlotte's Web, Emily continued quietly. I'd never heard anyone read like that, like the story mattered. Lucas grinned. That's my favorite, especially the spider part. Emily looked up, meeting his eyes for the first time with something close to delight. Mine too. Tom watched the exchange with a mix of awe and unease. This wasn't just a stranger anymore. She knew things, shared things, and the way Lucas responded to her, open, unguarded, stirred something inside him he couldn't quite name. A memory, a warning? He poured more water into their glasses, then sat back. So what happened? You lost touch? Emily nodded. She stopped coming one day. No one told us why. I always thought maybe she got too busy, or maybe it was just me. Tom's hands curled into fists beneath the table. No, he said, firmer than he meant to. It wasn't you. Claire. She wouldn't do that without reason. Emily offered a tight smile. That's what I told myself, but it still hurt. Lucas leaned forward. So why'd she send you to find me? The question hung in the air. Emily looked to Tom, unsure how much to say. She left me a letter, she said finally. She said I should come find Lucas, that he was important. Important how? Tom asked, his voice low. Emily opened her mouth, then closed it again. The truth was, she didn't know. The letter had been vague, just enough to compel her, not enough to explain. She said she made a promise, Emily said, softer now. One she never got to keep. Tom's jaw tightened. He pushed his plate aside, appetite gone. Claire never talked about you, he said, not harshly, just honestly. She never said a word about any of this. I figured, Emily whispered. I'm not saying I don't believe you, Tom added quickly, guilt tugging at the edge of his words. It's just a lot to take in. Emily nodded. I know. I didn't expect you to. You don't have to go, Lucas interrupted. They both looked at him. The boy shrugged. I mean, you can stay a while, right? Just until it makes sense. Tom opened his mouth to object. He should have. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the calm in Lucas's voice, or the way Emily had softened for the first time all night. Or maybe it was Claire, sitting quietly in the corners of his mind, asking him to do this one impossible thing, to trust her even now. He sighed. You can stay in the guest room, at least for tonight. Emily blinked, stunned. Tom stood and started clearing plates. Lucas, show her where the towels are? Lucas grinned and hopped off his chair. Come on, it's the blue room with the squeaky door. Emily followed, her footsteps light but uncertain. Left alone in the kitchen, Tom wiped his hands on a dish towel and stared out the window at the dark yard beyond. The porch light buzzed quietly. Rain still clung to the edges of the glass, but the storm had passed. There was a girl in his house who knew his wife, a letter in his pocket written by the woman he'd loved and lost, and a son upstairs already offering up a piece of his heart. Tom didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but something inside him stirred. Not fear, not even suspicion. Something older, wiser, hope. Tom had always thought he knew everything about Claire. Not just the favorite song she hummed when she did the dishes or the way she organized the spices alphabetically, but the deeper things. Her quiet resilience, the pain she buried behind soft smiles, the way her eyes would glaze over sometimes when certain subjects came up. Back then, he'd assumed it was just the past, something best left undisturbed. Now, standing in his bedroom with the letter in hand, he realized how little he truly knew. The house was still. Lucas had fallen asleep quickly after showing Emily the guest room, the kind of peaceful surrender only children seem capable of. Emily had remained quiet, her door shut gently, no sound since. Tom sat on the edge of his bed, unfolding the letter once more. Claire's handwriting was unmistakable, delicate, thoughtful, almost musical in its flow. She had always written like she spoke, with intent and warmth. He held the paper as if it might vanish, like something too fragile to exist in the real world. Tom, if this ever reaches you, it means I've done something I never meant to, kept something from you. Not because I didn't trust you, but because I didn't trust myself to face it. I'm sorry. Her name is Emily. You may never meet her, or maybe by some miracle you will. If you do, please be kind. I met her when she was just a girl, lonely, hurting, forgotten by a world that should have done better. I tried to be there, and for a little while I was. But then life happened. Our life. You, me, and Lucas. And I walked away from something I shouldn't have. I never stopped thinking about her. I wanted to adopt her. I came so close, Tom, but we were broke, barely making rent, and I was pregnant with Lucas. Everything was too complicated, so I let her go. I've never forgiven myself for that. If you're reading this, maybe you've seen what I saw in her, the strength, the gentleness, the flicker of something waiting to be loved back into existence. I hope you can give her a place, not just a roof, but a reason to stay. Tell her I never stopped caring, that she mattered, that she still does. Love always. Claire. Tom read the letter 3 times, the words settling like stones in his chest. He could see her in his mind's eye. Claire sitting at the kitchen table late at night, writing this, tears slipping down her cheek. The weight of a choice made years ago pressing on her like a storm she couldn't outrun. She must have written this before the accident, knowing she was running out of ways to fix what had been left undone. He leaned back against the headboard, eyes burning. It wasn't betrayal he felt, not even anger. It was something more complex, a grief that had never fully left him, now being re-stitched with a thread he hadn't known was missing. Emily had been part of Claire's heart, and now by some twist of fate, she'd been dropped into their lives again. Lost, yes, but maybe not beyond reach. The next morning, Tom found Emily already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. Her eyes were red but alert. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "Sorry if I used the kettle." "You're fine," he said, pouring himself coffee. "You didn't take the last donut, did you?" She cracked the faintest smile. "No promises." He sat across from her, placing the folded letter on the table between them. "I read it again last night." Emily glanced at it, then looked down. "I still don't know why she picked me." "I do," Tom said. She looked up slowly, eyes wary. "She saw something in you, something she couldn't forget." Emily swallowed hard. "I wanted to hate her for leaving. I told myself I did. But when she gave me that letter, it felt like someone finally remembered I existed." Tom nodded, silent for a long moment. "She wanted to adopt you." Emily's lips parted, but no sound came. It was as if someone had unplugged all the air from the room. "She wrote that she couldn't," Tom continued. "We were broke. Lucas was on the way. She thought you'd be better off than bouncing between a pregnant woman and a mechanic's garage." "I would have taken that," Emily whispered. "I would have taken anything." Tom reached across the table, not touching her, but close enough for the gesture to be felt. "I think she knew that. I think that's why she sent you back." They sat there in silence, the kind that doesn't need to be filled. Then Emily whispered, "I don't know where to go after this." Tom looked at her, saw the vulnerability under the worn-down strength. "You don't have to know right now, but I'm not family. I'm not even anything." "You're someone Claire loved," he said simply. "That counts for something around here." Emily blinked back tears, her hands trembling slightly around the mug. Tom stood, went to the cupboard, and pulled down a small ceramic plate, one Claire had painted at a fair years ago. It had been Lucas's cookie plate, but he hadn't used it in years. He placed it in front of Emily and said, with quiet finality, "No one gets to eat here if they're nothing." She stared at the plate for a long time. Then she smiled. Not big, not bold, but real. The next few days passed with a kind of gentle uncertainty, like walking across a frozen lake, unsure if the ice would hold, but stepping forward anyway. Emily hadn't said much, but she hadn't left either. That, to Tom, said more than any thank you ever could. She'd taken to waking early, often beating him to the kitchen, already brewing coffee or slicing apples for Lucas's lunchbox. She moved quietly, respectfully, like someone afraid to take up too much space. And yet, little by little, she was starting to leave traces of herself. An open window to let in the morning air, a towel neatly folded that no one asked her to fold, a book on the armrest of the couch with a flower tucked inside as a bookmark. Tom noticed it all, but it was Lucas who noticed her first. It started with the way he'd linger near the guest room door, pretending to look for his socks. Or the way his drawings slowly began to include a fourth figure. First a vague outline, then a girl with long hair, standing a little apart from the others. Then came the day with the crayons. Tom had been elbow deep in an oil change when Lucas burst into the garage, his cheeks pink with excitement. "Dad, Emily can draw." Tom blinked from under the hood. "She can?" "Yeah, like really good. She helped me with my dragon, and now it actually looks like a dragon instead of a sad horse." Tom laughed, wiping his hands on a rag. "That's some talent." Lucas tugged his sleeve. "Come see." Tom followed him inside, where Emily sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by crayons and a giant sheet of butcher paper. She looked up, startled, as if she'd been caught doing something she shouldn't. Lucas beamed. "Look what we made." The drawing was messy, colorful, and completely alive. A castle, a forest, a dragon with crooked wings, and a boy with a slingshot facing it down. Off to the side stood a girl with a crown made of stars holding a lantern. "That one's her," Lucas explained. "She lights the way, so the boy doesn't get lost." Tom looked at Emily. Her eyes were wide, caught between pride and embarrassment. "I didn't mean to," she started, but Tom shook his head. "It's good, really good." Lucas bounced on his heels. "She said I should write stories too, like a book. Can I?" Tom hesitated. He thought about school supplies, time, energy. But then he looked at his son, glowing with the kind of creative fire Claire had always fanned. "Yeah," he said softly. "You can." Lucas darted off to find a notebook. Tom lingered. "Thank," he said. Emily shrugged. "He just needed someone to say yes." Tom nodded, but something in his chest ached. He should have been the one to notice, to encourage. Later that evening, after Lucas had gone to bed, Tom stood by the sink while Emily dried the dishes. Rain pattered against the windows again, soft and steady. "He likes you," Tom said without looking at her. "I like him too." "You're good with him." Emily set down the plate she was drying. "It's not hard. He's a good kid. Kind. He gets that from his mom," Tom murmured. Emily didn't reply right away. Then, "He gets it from you, too." Tom glanced at her. Their eyes met for a moment. Not romantic, not yet, but filled with something unspoken. Respect, shared grief, a growing trust. Emily broke the gaze first, reaching for another plate. "I'm not trying to take anything away. I know I'm not family. You don't have to be family to matter." She paused, letting the words sink in. "I haven't had many places where I mattered," she admitted. "It's hard to trust it when you find one." Tom nodded. "Yeah, I know." They stood in silence for a while, the kind that felt earned, comfortable, like a breath exhaled after being held too long. Over the next few days, the house changed in subtle ways. Emily started cooking dinner when Tom worked late. Lucas asked her to read to him at bedtime. Not every night, but enough. She said yes every time. She found a rhythm in the house without disturbing it, like a song that joined a melody already in progress and somehow made it fuller. One afternoon, Tom came home to the smell of banana bread. Lucas was at the table, flour on his nose, while Emily tried, unsuccessfully, to keep a straight face. "We had an accident," Lucas said, holding up dough-covered hands. Tom smiled. "Looks delicious." "We saved you a corner," Emily said. "The burnt one. My favorite." They laughed. It felt good. It felt normal. That night, Tom passed by the living room and paused. Emily and Lucas were curled up on the couch, flipping through an old photo album Claire had kept. Lucas was pointing at a picture of Claire at a pumpkin patch, her hair tangled by wind, her laughter frozen in time. "She used to sing this really silly song," Lucas was saying. "Like, embarrassingly silly." Emily smiled. "She did that for us, too. When we brushed our teeth, she made up the words." Tom's chest tightened. He stepped back, giving them space, but also letting himself feel it, the warmth returning to a room that had been too quiet for too long. Something was blooming again in the silence. Not a replacement, not even forgiveness yet, but connection. The first snow came quietly, almost as if asking permission. Emily stood by the living room window, arms wrapped around herself, watching the gentle flakes drift through the porch light like falling stars. Inside the house, the scent of cinnamon lingered from the cookies Lucas had helped her bake, though more dough had ended up on his shirt than in the oven. Tom was out back, closing up the garage for the night. Lucas had already gone to bed, still wearing a dusting of flour on his cheek. It should have felt peaceful, but inside her chest something twisted. Because for all the warmth, the stillness, the ordinary grace of this house, Emily couldn't stop waiting for it to be taken away. She didn't know how to live inside stability without anticipating its collapse. She heard the door creak behind her, then Tom's quiet footsteps. "Snow caught you off guard too, huh?" he said, rubbing his hands together as he walked in. "Wasn't even in the forecast." Emily nodded but didn't turn from the window. "It's pretty." "It is." He stood beside her, both of them watching the flakes kiss the top of the truck and melt into the driveway. After a moment, he said gently, "You've been quiet today." She hesitated. Then in a voice so low it almost disappeared into the window pane, she said, "Do you ever feel like you're just borrowing happiness?" Tom turned to look at her. Emily's eyes were distant. "Like, it's not really yours. Just something you're holding until someone takes it back." Tom didn't speak. He waited. She wrapped her arms tighter. "There was a family once. I was 12. They said they wanted to adopt me. It was going to be final after Christmas. I remember the tree, the gifts, the way they called me their daughter." Her voice cracked. "The day before court, they changed their minds. Just like that. Said they weren't ready." She blinked hard. "I still remember the way they looked at me when they told me. Like I was a dog they couldn't train." Tom swallowed. "Emily." She shook her head as if to wave off his sympathy. "After that, I stopped hoping. I told myself I didn't need anyone. I bounced from place to place, a few shelters, a few couches. I kept telling myself I was fine. But I wasn't." She finally looked at him. "I don't know how to trust anything good." Tom felt the ache of those words settle deep in his chest. "I get it," he said quietly. "After Claire died, I stopped expecting good things too. I kept going, because of Lucas. But it was like walking through fog. You start to believe maybe this is just it. Maybe all you get is what's behind you." He paused. "But then you find yourself standing in a kitchen, watching your son laugh at burnt cookies. Or you look up and realize someone you barely know just made your house feel less empty." She looked down. "I don't want to ruin this." "You're not ruining anything." Emily didn't answer. The snow kept falling. "I read something once," Tom said, "that trees with the strongest roots are the ones that grew through storms. They had to dig deeper just to survive." She let out a shaky breath. "What if mine are broken?" Tom turned toward her, his voice steady and low. "Then maybe they just need a little help growing back." The room fell quiet again, but this time it was a silence filled with something alive. After a moment, Emily spoke again. "Claire, she was the first person who made me feel seen, like I mattered, even when I didn't believe her. She used to bring me books and sit with me while I read. She said everyone deserves a chapter that doesn't hurt." Tom smiled faintly. "Sounds like her." "She said I was brave," Emily whispered, voice breaking. "But I wasn't. I was scared all the time. I still am." "You kept going," Tom said. "That's what brave looks like." Tears slipped down Emily's cheeks, silent and unforced. She didn't try to hide them. Maybe for the first time she didn't have to. Tom stepped back, gave her space, but his voice was warm as a hand held out in the dark. "You don't have to prove anything here. Not to me, not to Lucas. You're already enough." She nodded slowly, wiping her face with her sleeve. "I don't know what comes next. You don't have to. Sometimes the next step is just staying." She looked at him, really looked, and something shifted behind her eyes. It wasn't certainty, but it was close. Trust, or at least the beginning of it. Tom walked to the kitchen, pulling down 2 mugs and pouring tea. "Want to sit a while?" he asked. Emily nodded. She joined him at the table, both of them cradling the warmth between their hands. They didn't talk much after that. They didn't need to. Sometimes healing starts with telling the truth out loud. Sometimes it's enough just to be heard and to not be asked to leave afterward. Tom hadn't touched the old Buick in years. It sat in the back corner of the garage, covered by a dusty tarp and wedged between a disassembled snowblower and a stack of tool chests. The car had been Claire's project, or at least it had been once. She dreamed of restoring it together when they were newly married. "For weekend drives," she used to say. "Just you, me, and whatever back road we get lost on." After she died, Tom couldn't bear to look at it. The sight of it felt too much like a promise left unfinished. But that morning, as the sun broke through the gray cloud cover and spilled into the garage windows, Tom found himself standing in front of the Buick once more. He wasn't alone. Emily hovered a few feet away, hands tucked into the sleeves of her borrowed flannel. She tilted her head at the car, curious. "Is this yours?" Tom nodded slowly. "Was hers. She loved this old thing." "What year?" "67. Skylark." Emily whistled under her breath. "Classic." Tom ran a hand over the cover, then in one slow motion, pulled it back. Dust bloomed into the air like memories set free. The body was solid, the paint faded but not rusted, the chrome bumpers dulled with time but intact. "She wanted to restore it," he said, not looking at Emily. "We got as far as ordering parts and pulling the engine. Then, life happened." Emily stepped closer. "Can I see?" He gestured toward the hood. She lifted it gently, peering inside. The engine bay was clean but untouched. Parts still labeled in Claire's tidy handwriting, blue tape and black marker. Emily read one aloud. "Timing cover bolts, do not lose." She smiled. "Sounds like she ran a tight ship." Tom chuckled. "She did. She was organized, stubborn, and somehow always 2 steps ahead of me." There was a long pause. Then Emily said quietly, "Maybe you should finish it." Tom glanced at her. "I wouldn't know where to start." "Then start with one piece." She bent down and picked up a small rusted bracket from the workbench, brushed it off, and held it in her palm. "Sometimes all you need is a piece that fits." He stared at the bracket, then at her. There was something in her eyes, encouragement, but not pressure, like she believed he could do it, even if he didn't. He exhaled. "All right." It began like that, small, simple. Tom showed Emily how to clean the parts with degreaser. She learned quickly, surprisingly quickly. Within the hour, they'd laid out the distributor cap, valve cover, and 2 boxes of old gaskets, sorting what could be salvaged from what needed replacing. Lucas joined them after school, dropping his backpack and diving into the action. "Is this the car Mom picked out?" he asked, eyes wide. Tom nodded. "She called it her someday ride." Lucas ran his hand over the dusty hood. "Think we could take it to the lake when it's done?" Tom smiled. "That's the idea." As the day faded into early evening, the garage transformed. The lights hummed overhead, the heater buzzed near the door, and for the first time in a long time, the space didn't feel like a tomb. It felt like it had a heartbeat. Tom watched Emily from across the workbench. She had grease smudged on her cheek and a wrench in her hand, sleeves rolled up, hair tied back. She looked alive, focused, not like someone barely hanging on, but someone rebuilding something. Maybe not just a car, maybe herself. They took a break around 6. Tom cracked open 3 sodas and passed them around. Lucas sat on the concrete floor, sipping his drink and swinging his legs. "I think Mom would like this," he said suddenly. "Us doing this together." Tom's throat tightened. "Yeah," he said after a moment. "I think she would." Emily didn't say anything, but her eyes shimmered. Later, after Lucas had gone inside to finish his math homework, Tom and Emily stayed behind to close up. The car sat quietly, parts cleaned and labeled, the beginnings of something new. Tom leaned against the workbench, wiping his hands. "You're good at this," he said. Emily smiled. "I like fixing things." There was a pause. "I think Claire would have wanted this finished," she added. "Not just the car, all of it. Everything she couldn't finish." Tom looked at her. "She didn't get to tell me everything. Not about you. Not about how much she carried." "She carried too much," Emily said softly. They stood there for a while, surrounded by tools and parts and the quiet hum of old memories. Tom finally spoke. "You ever think maybe we're not here to finish what other people started, but to start something new?" Emily looked at him, her eyes searching. "Maybe. But sometimes finishing something for someone else helps you figure out what you're supposed to build next." He nodded slowly. "Tomorrow," he said, "we tackle the fuel system." She grinned. "Deal." They turned off the lights and stepped outside. The cold hit them instantly, but neither seemed to notice. The stars were beginning to peek through the clouds, faint and far but steady. Tom glanced at Emily as they crossed the yard. "You know," he said, You fit in here." She looked at him, caught off guard. He shrugged. "Just thought you should know." Her smile was quiet but radiant, and for the first time in a long time, Tom didn't feel like he was keeping a promise to the past. He felt like he was making a new one. It started with a glance at the grocery store. Not a hostile one, just curious, lingering too long. Tom didn't think much of it. Maple Hollow wasn't the kind of town where secrets stayed quiet for long, even when no one said anything out loud. But then came the second glance, this time from Mrs. Lavery, who worked the pharmacy counter. Her brows lifted slightly when she saw Emily trailing beside Tom and Lucas, her coat too big and her hands full with a shopping basket. She smiled, but it was tight, thin-lipped. Then came the whispers. Tom heard them as he stepped into Murray's Hardware 2 days later. Two men by the counter paused mid-conversation. One offered a polite nod, the other avoided eye contact altogether. He didn't need to ask what they were talking about. Back in the garage, everything felt as it always did. Safe, busy, filled with the smell of motor oil and the sound of Lucas humming to himself. Emily spent her mornings cleaning engine parts and her afternoons sanding the Buick's body. She moved with quiet confidence now, sleeves rolled, hair pinned back. The house hummed with a new kind of rhythm, one Tom had grown to rely on. So when the knock came that Friday morning, it hit him like a jolt to the chest. He opened the front door to find Linda Crowley standing on the porch, shoulders squared, lips pursed, clipboard clutched to her chest like it was a weapon. President of the Church Women's Committee, choir organizer, self-appointed guardian of small-town morals. "Morning, Tom," she said, though it didn't sound like one. "Linda," he replied, wary. She glanced over his shoulder toward the sound of laughter in the kitchen, Lucas and Emily baking again, probably. Her expression didn't soften. "I won't take up much of your time," she said crisply. "Just thought you should know people are talking." "About what?" he asked, though he already knew. Linda hesitated. "You've got a young woman living under your roof, one no one seems to know. And she's not exactly family." Tom folded his arms. "She's a friend of Claire's. She's helping around the house." "I'm sure she is," Linda said, tone clipped. "But Tom, people notice things. And Lucas, he's a good boy. But children pick up on instability." He felt his jaw tighten. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything," she said. "Just looking out for what's best. For you, for the boy, and for our community." She handed him a folded flyer. A church gathering. "In times of uncertainty," it read in bold script, "return to what's righteous." Tom didn't take it. "I appreciate your concern," he said, voice low, "but we're doing just fine." Linda's lips pinched tighter. "Tom, sometimes doing the right thing means asking hard questions. You think about that." And then she was gone. He stood there for a long moment, the cold creeping in through the open door. Then he shut it, not gently. In the kitchen, Lucas was icing cookies while Emily watched from across the counter, smiling. She looked up when Tom walked in, the smile faltering. "Everything okay?" Tom forced a nod. "Yeah, just town politics." Emily didn't press, but something in her eyes shifted, like she knew. That afternoon, he found her outside by the Buick, cleaning the windshield with practiced hands. The sky was gray, wind sharp. Her coat flapped slightly as she worked. "You okay?" he asked. She didn't turn around. "I saw her." "Linda?" Emily nodded. "She looked at me like I was a stray dog you forgot to send away." Tom let out a breath. "She doesn't speak for everyone. She speaks loud enough." He walked over and leaned against the car beside her. "This town's got a long memory, sometimes too long. People get comfortable with what they think they know." She wiped the cloth across the glass. "I've been called worse than a mistake." He turned to her. "You're not a mistake." Emily finally looked at him, eyes raw. "Maybe not to you, but I know how these stories go. Girl shows up, doesn't belong, makes things harder, leaves." "You forgot the part where she helps rebuild an entire car," he said gently, "and gives a kid his laugh back." Her throat bobbed. "I don't want to be a problem, Tom. You're not. I don't want to ruin what you've built." He was quiet for a beat. Then he said, "I've been rebuilding ever since Claire died. Every day since then. One screw, one bolt, One bedtime story at a time. You didn't ruin anything, Emily. He looked at her, steady and sure. You made things better. Her eyes welled. Why are you being so kind to me? Tom didn't have a fancy answer. He just said, because Claire would want me to be, and because I do. She looked down, wiping her eyes on her sleeve. That night, they sat on the porch after Lucas had gone to bed. The cold nipped at their fingers, but neither moved. You know, Tom said quietly, when Claire and I moved here, we were the subject of gossip too. People didn't like that she worked nights, that I stayed home with Lucas sometimes. Emily turned toward him. Really? He nodded. They think kindness has rules, that it belongs only to those who follow the script. But you didn't. No, he said, and I won't now. She exhaled, a cloud of breath in the cold air. Thank you. He turned to her. You don't owe this town anything, Emily. You don't even owe me. But if you want to stay, if this feels like a place you can plant roots, I like that. Her voice was barely a whisper. I'd like that too. And as the wind settled and the porch light flickered above them, something unspoken passed between them. Not a promise, but the beginning of one. The sound of laughter in the garage hadn't been heard in years. It echoed between the walls now, clear, bright, and entirely unexpected. Tom glanced up from under the Buick's lifted hood, a socket wrench in one hand, grease smudged across his forearm. Across the garage, Lucas sat cross-legged on the concrete floor, carefully painting a model of the car they were rebuilding. Emily leaned over his shoulder, making suggestions, her eyes squinting with playful mock seriousness. No, chrome doesn't go on the tires, she teased. Lucas grinned. This is a futuristic model. It's got chrome everywhere. Tom shook his head with a laugh. You'll have Jay Leno calling us any minute. It had been nearly a month since Emily arrived on their doorstep, soaked and broken and carrying a name that tied her to a past Tom hadn't dared to revisit. In that time, something had shifted in their house. Not abruptly, not dramatically, but like dawn breaking through a long winter night. The garage, once a storage place for grief, had become a place of motion again. Together, they had pulled the old Skylark from silence and brought it back to life. They rebuilt the carburetor, flushed the radiator, and replaced the fuel lines. The tires had been replaced, the windshield reinstalled. Lucas had learned to hand Emily the right wrench with surprising accuracy, and she learned to tell when Tom needed silence more than instruction. It wasn't about the car anymore. Not really. It was about the doing. About three people, each carrying their own ache, building something from the bones of yesterday. That morning, as sunlight streamed in through the high garage windows, Emily reached for a rag to wipe her hands and said, I think it's time. Tom arched a brow. Time for what? She nodded toward the passenger seat. You haven't sat behind the wheel yet. He hesitated. The car sat like a memory made whole again. The paint wasn't perfect, just primer and elbow grease. But the seats were reupholstered, the dashboard gleamed, and everything was wired. The keys dangled from the ignition. I don't know if I can, Tom admitted. Emily looked at him gently. You don't have to drive it, just sit. He walked around the front of the car slowly, like approaching something sacred. His fingers brushed the edge of the hood. Then he opened the door and lowered himself into the driver's seat. The leather creaked under his weight, and for a moment, the smell of it transported him. Back to Claire, laughing behind the wheel, her elbow out the window, a scarf in her hair, and Fleetwood Mac on the radio. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, Emily was standing quietly beside the car, Lucas beside her. He turned the key. The engine rumbled to life, not a roar, but a steady, healthy hum that vibrated through the floor like a pulse. Lucas clapped. She lives, he shouted. Tom grinned. She does. They stood there for a long moment, listening to the engine like it was music. Later that day, Tom found Emily on the back porch, a blanket draped over her shoulders, watching the snow begin to melt in patches across the yard. Spring would come early this year, or so the farmers said. There was something bittersweet in that, the way the seasons moved forward, whether you were ready or not. Tom joined her, coffee in hand. You did good in there. Emily smiled, eyes still on the fading snow. We did. You ever think you'd be the kind of person who could rebuild a classic car? She laughed softly. I didn't think I was the kind of person who could stay anywhere longer than a week. He studied her for a moment. You're still thinking about leaving, aren't you? She didn't answer right away. It's not that I want to, she said quietly. It's just, people like me don't usually get to stay. The longer I'm here, the more I want to belong. And that scares me. Tom looked out at the yard, then back at her. You already do. Emily blinked. You really believe that? I do, he said. And more than that, I think Lucas does too. She smiled, then looked away, brushing a tear before it could fall. He asked me today if I'd be at his school recital. You planning on going? I told him yes, and then I panicked. Tom chuckled. You'll be great. She turned to him, eyes softer now. What if this isn't real, Tom? What if it's just a good dream I got too comfortable in? He shook his head. Dreams don't rebuild engines or teach 10-year-olds to mix paint. This is real. She studied him, then looked back at the horizon. I miss her, she whispered. Tom swallowed hard. Me too. There was silence, but it wasn't empty. It was shared, woven with memory and acceptance. She would have been proud of you, Emily added. Of us, for finishing what she started. Tom nodded. Claire had a way of planting things that didn't bloom until long after she was gone. Emily looked down. You think she knew? That I'd come? I don't know, he said honestly, but I think she hoped, and that's enough. As the sun dipped lower, casting long golden shadows across the snow-streaked yard, Lucas burst through the back door. It's ready, he shouted. Come see. They followed him to the garage where the car sat, polished and waiting. Lucas beamed with pride. Tom tossed Emily the keys. She caught them, startled. Me? He grinned. Take it around the block. You've earned it. Lucas whooped. Can I come? Only if she lets you play DJ, Tom said. Emily looked down at the keys in her hand. They felt heavier than metal. They felt like trust. She opened the door and Lucas scrambled in beside her. She adjusted the seat, turned the key, and the engine came alive again. She looked at Tom one more time. He gave her a nod. Go. She pulled out of the driveway slowly, then with more confidence as she turned down the street. Tom stood on the porch, arms crossed, a slow smile stretching across his face as he watched them disappear around the corner. The car was reborn. But more importantly, so was something else. The wind had changed. Tom could feel it in the way the porch swing creaked more gently at night, and in how the garage didn't feel quite so cold in the mornings. Spring had begun to stretch her limbs across Maple Hollow, coaxing life from the frost-bitten ground. It had been 2 months since Emily arrived. She was still in the guest room, still folding her borrowed flannels with crisp corners, still asking if it was all right to use the last of the eggs or if she should run to the store. But something had shifted, subtly, like a song changing key mid-note. The silence in the house no longer felt like absence. It felt like presence. Tom stood at the stove that Saturday morning, flipping pancakes with the same worn spatula Claire used to wield like a scepter. Lucas sat at the table in his pajamas, chin propped on one hand, watching Emily as she braided his cereal box prize into a little string bracelet. You're gonna have to wear that, she said, smiling. I know, Lucas groaned playfully. At school. Better than a sock puppet, Tom added from the stove. Lucas rolled his eyes with theatrical flair. You're both very funny. Tom slid a fresh pancake onto a plate and turned off the burner. He hesitated, then said, Can I talk to you both a sec? Emily looked up. Of course. Tom sat down across from them, folding his hands. I've been thinking, he began slowly. This house, it's not perfect. Floors creak, pipes groan, and the heat's temperamental if you run the dishwasher at the same time. Lucas grinned. You mean it's haunted? Tom gave a half smile. It's a fixer-upper, but it's ours. Emily listened quietly, unsure where he was going. When Claire passed, I didn't think this place would ever feel like home again. Not really. I kept it going for Lucas, because I had to. He looked between them. But the truth is, lately it hasn't just felt like a house. It's felt full again. Because of the two of you. Lucas tilted his head. Because of Emily. Tom nodded. Because of Emily, and because of the way you laugh with her, and the way she sees you. Emily's lips parted slightly, her fingers still resting on the half-finished bracelet. Tom reached into his pocket and placed something on the table. A small key. To the front door, he said softly. I had a copy made. Emily stared at it. Tom continued. I don't know what you're searching for, or if you're even still searching. But if this feels like somewhere you could stay, not just visit, I want you to know the door's open. Emily said nothing at first. Lucas looked at her. I already thought you lived here. That broke the tension, and Emily let out a soft, broken laugh. She picked up the key, turning it in her hand like it might vanish. I've never had one, she whispered. Tom frowned. A house key? She shook her head. A place that wanted me to have one. Silence fell like a warm blanket. I don't have much to offer, she added. I'm still figuring out what I'm good at. You make a mean banana bread, Tom said gently, and my kid thinks you hang the moon. Lucas shrugged. She kind of does. Emily smiled, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. You don't have to decide today, Tom said, but the key's yours, no matter what. She nodded slowly. I think I already decided. Hifham. That afternoon, they cleared space in the hall closet for Emily's things, no longer tucked away in corners or folded inside drawers meant for guests. Her books lined the bottom shelf, next to Lucas's backpack and Tom's worn boots. She hung one of Claire's old scarves on the hook nearest the door, and when she did, it felt less like borrowing and more like continuing. Later, Lucas dragged her to the backyard with a soccer ball. Tom watched them from the porch, coffee in hand, as Emily kicked off her shoes and chased him across the grass, laughing with abandon. The afternoon light caught in her hair. She looked younger, or maybe just unburdened. He thought of Claire then, not with pain, but with gratitude. Somehow the woman he loved had known exactly what they'd all needed, even in her absence. That night, Emily tucked Lucas into bed for the first time. She didn't ask. He didn't need her to. Tom stood in the hallway, watching through the cracked door as she sat at the edge of the bed, reading from a well-worn copy of Charlotte's Web. Lucas was half asleep before she reached the third page. When she emerged, her eyes met Tom's. She was really good at this, Emily said softly. Tom nodded. She'd like knowing you're here. I hope so. They stood there for a long moment, the space between them full of all the things that didn't need to be said. Tom reached up and tapped the doorframe. This house, it used to echo. Now it hums. Emily smiled. I like that. I do too. Before she turned in, Emily paused. Hey, Tom. Yeah? I'm still scared. He looked at her, steady, gentle. Me too. She exhaled, nodded once, and disappeared down the hall. Tom stood there alone, heart full. Family wasn't always something you were born into. Sometimes it was something you chose, piece by piece. And sometimes, if you were lucky, it chose you back. Tom found it on a Wednesday morning when the light outside was soft and the garage smelled like spring dust and possibility. He hadn't been looking for anything. He just wanted to check the oil in the Skylark after its first real drive around town. Emily had driven. Lucas had chosen the music. Tom had sat in the back seat, letting the wind comb through his hair like time reversing itself. Now as he opened the glove box, a folded envelope fell into his lap. It was cream-colored, slightly yellowed at the edges. No postage, no name. Only one thing was written on the front. If she finds you. Tom froze. The handwriting was Claire's. He sat there for a long moment, the engine ticking softly as it cooled. He ran his thumb across the paper's edge. The ink was smudged slightly, like it had been written in a hurry, or with hands that trembled. Slowly he opened it. Tom, I don't know if this letter will ever reach you. I don't even know if Emily will find her way back to us. But if she does, if by some chance she's brave enough to walk through whatever storm she's carrying, I want you to give her this, and I want you to understand why. I made mistakes, not cruel ones, but quiet ones. The kind you don't see until they've settled too deep to undo. I walked away from her when I should have fought harder. I told myself she'd be fine, that someone else would love her better. But I never stopped wondering if she felt like I gave up. And then life got full. You. Lucas. I was happy, but I carried her in my chest like a stone. Every time I made pancakes, I thought of her. Every time I read to Lucas, I thought of her. I thought I'd have time. But just in case I don't, just in case life ends mid-sentence, I want you to know this. She mattered. She matters. And if you're holding this, Tom, it means you have a chance to do what I couldn't. Help her see that she was always worthy of staying. This isn't about guilt. It's about love. The kind that stretches beyond what we get right in life. The kind that forgives. If she's there, she's already chosen you. Now choose her back. Love always. Claire. Tom didn't realize he was crying until the paper blurred in front of him. He folded the letter carefully, reverently, and sat for several minutes in the car Claire had once dreamed of rebuilding. A car Emily had helped restore. A car that somehow had become a vessel for more than steel and rubber. It had carried hope, carried healing, carried legacy. He found Emily outside in the yard with Lucas, their voices rising in gentle laughter as they played a clumsy game of catch. She wore her hair pulled back in a loose knot, Tom's old denim jacket on her shoulders, and her eyes sparkled with something that had taken root in recent weeks. Peace. "Hey," Tom called softly. Emily turned, catching the ball in one hand. "Everything okay?" He held up the letter. Her expression changed instantly. Open, uncertain, wary. She crossed the yard slowly, Lucas trailing behind. "It was in the glove box," Tom said. "Claire must have put it there before." He didn't finish. Emily took the letter with trembling fingers, eyes scanning the familiar loops of ink. She sat down on the porch step without a word and began to read. Tom and Lucas stood quietly nearby, waiting. The only sound was the rustling of leaves and a wind chime swaying gently from the gutter. When she finished, Emily didn't look up right away. She clutched the letter to her chest and exhaled like she had been holding her breath for years. "She remembered," she whispered. "She never forgot," Tom said. Emily's voice cracked. "I thought maybe I imagined how much she cared. Maybe I made it all bigger than it was in my head." Tom knelt beside her. "She carried you with her every day. She didn't get to finish that story, but you're still here. You are the story now." Emily looked at him, her eyes raw. "She wanted me to stay." "She did," Tom said, "and so do we." She smiled through her tears, a quiet, messy thing. "I think for the first time in my life, I believe that." Lucas climbed up beside her, leaning his head on her shoulder without saying a word. Emily wrapped an arm around him, pressing her cheek against his hair. That evening, Tom cooked dinner while Emily and Lucas set the table. There was music playing, something soft, something with acoustic guitars and lyrics about home. The kitchen was full of overlapping voices, footsteps, the clatter of dishes, and the faint scent of rosemary. It was ordinary, but to Tom, it felt sacred. After dinner, he and Emily stood at the sink, washing plates side by side. The hum of the house surrounded them, like the building itself was finally exhaling after holding something in for far too long. "You okay?" he asked. Emily nodded. "I am." He looked at her. "That letter, it was her gift to both of us." Emily met his eyes. "It was her blessing." He dried his hands and leaned against the counter. "You think you'll ever stop running?" She smiled. "Maybe, but for the first time, I don't want to." "Good," he said, "because this place is better with you in it." She blushed slightly and looked down. "Claire would have loved seeing this," he added. "Not just the car, the whole thing. You, Lucas, us, somehow learning how to start over." Emily looked at him, warmth rising behind her eyes. "It's strange. For so long, I thought the only way to survive was to forget everything. But maybe remembering, maybe finishing someone else's unfinished story, is a way of honoring it." Tom nodded. "You didn't come here to erase anything. You came to help us rebuild it." She reached into her pocket and pulled out the key he'd given her days before. She placed it on the counter and looked at him seriously. "I think it's time to move out of the guest room," she said. Tom smiled. "Yeah?" She nodded. "I'd like to make this feel like home. For real." "Then it already is," he said. The sun rose slow and golden over Maple Hollow, casting a honey-colored light through the trees and onto the narrow road that curved past Tom's garage. Spring had taken firm hold of the town. Wildflowers danced along the ditches. Robins nested in the eaves, and the days stretched a little longer, as if time itself had softened. Inside the house, the air was filled with the smell of bacon and coffee, and the faint sound of Lucas humming as he packed his school bag in the kitchen. Emily stood at the stove, flipping pancakes with practiced ease, her hair tucked into a loose braid that brushed her shoulder. Tom leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, watching them both with quiet gratitude. It had become a ritual, the three of them moving through mornings like music. Nothing grand, nothing flashy, just together. And after everything, that was more than enough. Lucas zipped up his jacket and slung his backpack over one shoulder. "You're still coming, right?" he asked, eyes wide. Emily smiled. "To your recital, I wouldn't miss it." He looked at Tom. "Can we drive the Skylark?" Tom laughed. "Not unless you want us to show up with smoke trailing from the tailpipe." Lucas grinned and headed for the front door. "I'll save you a seat." The door shut behind him with a gentle click, leaving Tom and Emily in the warm quiet of the kitchen. She turned off the burner and slid the last pancake onto a plate. "He's growing up so fast," she said softly. Tom nodded. "Some days I look at him and wonder when he stopped needing help tying his shoes." Emily leaned against the counter, mug in hand. "He still needs you, just in different ways." Tom met her gaze. "Kinda like I needed you." She looked down, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "I've been thinking," he said after a pause, "about what's next." She arched an eyebrow. "Next?" He gestured toward the window, toward the garage beyond it. "We've rebuilt the car. We've rebuilt the house. Maybe it's time to rebuild the business a little." "You want to expand?" He shrugged. "Not much. Just give it a name that feels like where we are now, not where we used to be." She tilted her head. "What would you call it?" He smiled. "Bennett and Co." Her brow furrowed gently. "And the Co?" "Company," he said. "Companionship. Connection. Could be anything. Could be you." Emily looked at him for a long moment. "I don't know anything about running a business." "You didn't know anything about rebuilding a Buick either. And look how that turned out." She laughed, the sound light and genuine. He stepped closer. "This isn't just about wrenches and invoices. It's about making a life, one that includes you, if you want it." Emily's smile faded to something softer, deeper. "I do want it. I want all of it." Tom exhaled, as if releasing a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. They stood there, surrounded by the quiet hum of a home that had found its rhythm again. That evening, they arrived at Lucas's school auditorium early, slipping into the second row. The Skylark had made it just fine, only a minor rattle Tom promised to check tomorrow. Lucas took the stage with a nervous smile and a trumpet that looked slightly too big for him. But when he saw Emily in the crowd, his face lit up. He played with confidence, every note a little louder than the last. At the end, when the final song faded and the room erupted in applause, Lucas searched the crowd and smiled when he saw Tom and Emily clapping side by side. Afterward, as the crowd spilled into the hallway, Lucas ran to them, cheeks flushed with pride. "You nailed it," Tom said, ruffling his hair. "You were amazing," Emily added, crouching to meet his eyes. "And brave." Lucas shrugged. "Wasn't so bad once I saw you out there." They walked to the car together, the three of them fitting into the bench seat like it had been made for them. Tom drove slow, the windows down, the air warm with the scent of blooming trees. The town rolled past, old shops, familiar corners. But it all looked new somehow. Back home, Lucas went straight to bed, exhausted and happy. Emily lingered on the porch while Tom locked up the garage. When he joined her, she was looking at the stars. "They look closer here," she said. "Maybe they are." She turned to him. "Thank you for giving me a place, for giving me space to be." He sat beside her, close but not hurried. "You didn't need permission, Emily. You just needed someone to remind you that you belong." She reached into her jacket and pulled out something small. Claire's letter. It was folded neatly now, corners soft with handling. "I read this every few days," she said. "Not because I need to, but because I want to remember what it means to be chosen." Tom nodded. "We both needed to remember that." She looked at him, eyes glowing in the porch light. "Do you ever think about what comes next?" He smiled. "Sometimes, But I've learned that the best things happen when you stop trying to script every moment. She leaned her head on his shoulder. So what do we call this? Whatever this is. He thought for a moment, then said, a beginning. Shoo. And in the quiet that followed, with the stars watching and the porch swing creaking softly beneath them, they sat in the warmth of what they had built. Not just a house or a car, but a life stitched together by second chances, small acts of kindness, and the unexpected gift of finding family in the most unlikely of ways. What a journey, right? I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop a comment below and say hi. It means so much to see this little community grow, one beautiful story at a time. If this story touched you, gave you hope, or made you believe just a little more in the power of kindness, please give it a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe for more heartwarming stories like this one. From my heart to yours, thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next story.